The parsha we have today, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because we know what happens here. I just want to get a few key points straight and make sure that we absorb these things. Of course, this is Parshat Vayislach, which is Hebrew for "and he sent." It's very interesting. You see the Va before a lot of the parsha names. And the Va, if you're keeping track, it stands for, in Hebrew, and. It's interesting that we see, these parshat. It's a continuation of the previous. And he did this, and he sent him, and of course, it's talking about typically the different patriarchs, the papas. We see this in Bereshit, Genesis 23:3 through 36:43. That's our parsha this week. We see here in Bereshit 33:8 through 11. It says Esau asked, "What was the meaning of this procession of droves I encountered?" And he answered, "It was to win my Lord's favor." Now, who answered? Yaakov. 10 points. There you go. First in line for that. I saw like a bunt cake looking thing. You get first in line for that. Esau replied, "I have plenty already, my brother. Keep your possessions for yourself." Yaakov said, "No. Please, I know I have won your favor. If now I have won your favor, then accept my gift. Just seeing your face has been like seeing the face of Elohim. Now that you have received me, so please accept the gift I have brought you, for God has dealt kindly with me, and I have enough." Thus he urged him until he accepted it. So leading up to this, remember there was a little bit of a struggle between the brothers, right? Yaakov and Esau, remember that? We covered that in previous portions. The issue was over inheritance. The issue was over pride. The issue was over authority and eldership. We see here that Esau was coming with many, many men. I believe it says it was 400 soldiers. Now Yaakov, he had gone through a few different things. He had worked for 7 years, got a wife, realized the next morning, that's great, but not the one I had asked for. Worked another 7 years, got another wife. They had a bunch of kids. At this point in time, between Yaakov, his 2 wives, and their servants, he has 11 children. And through this 11 children, he has also got a lot of goats and oxen. This guy, the more oxen and the goats you have at this time is the more status you have, the more authority, okay? We know that Avram was the sheik of his tribe. Avram was the head of his tribe. He was a man of great wealth. Some of that comes down to Yaakov, to Yitzhak, and then to Yaakov. We know that Yaakov probably was thinking he didn't stand a chance. My brother's big. I know my brother. Big, scary, hairy dude. He is a hunter, and I am his prey. What chance do I have to stand against my brother? He must have been thinking. But before all this happens, the guy has a dream. A couple dreams, actually. He had a dream first of, he sees this, what was most likely maybe like this DNA strand of the messengers going up and down. But now he's having another dream. He doesn't know if it's reality or a dream. Some say he was dreaming the whole time. Most of us can agree it was reality. And he has a wrestling match. We don't exactly know who he has a wrestling match with. We do know that he separated himself from his family to make 2 camps, so that if one of his camps were destroyed, then the other camp would at least survive. He goes off by himself the evening before he meets his brother. By this time, he had already sent many gifts to his brother through different droves of people. And when his brother said, "Who are you? Who are you with?" he said, "We are with your servant, Yaakov. And these are gifts for our Lord, our master, Esau." I guess that's a good way to make someone not want to kill you right away, is give them some goats. Well, it depends on who they are. If they're a PETA kind of person, it's not going to work, right? But this is what he does. And then he goes off by himself. There's a key part in the Torah. He goes off by himself. He's awoken in this wrestling match, this war, this fight for his life. It's a messenger. It's an angel. It's something that he had never encountered before. Now we know that Yaakov sees some type of authority in this figure that he wrestles with. Because of course, after he wrestles, he says, I have seen the face of God. Now later on, as I just read, when he sees Esau, he says, seeing your face is like seeing the face of God. So some believe that he was actually just wrestling Esau. Would Esau go off in the night and just fight someone randomly? No provocation? Yeah, I wouldn't put that in either. This time he got no soup. Yeah, lentil soup is good. I wouldn't trade my birthright for it, but it's pretty good stuff. But there's an evidence here. There's an evidence here we must not just skim over. That is that Yaakov's name changed. We know that his father, Avram, his grandfather Avram, I should say, and his grandmother, Sarah, they were Avram and Sarai, and they became Avraham and Sarah. They added the Hayes to their name. Half of the Lord's sacred name was implanted with them. Now Yitzhak didn't get a name change, did he? He got some personality changes. He got a few different changes in his life. After losing his mother, he gets this wonderful wife Rivka to help him carry on the lineage of the people. He probably wanted a new change after almost being sacrificed. He probably wanted to go into the witness protection program. But Yaakov here is about to have a name change that is almost every letter of his name. A couple stay the same. But Yaakov, of course, means deceiver or supplanter. The word Yaakov, Jacob, it infers that not just his name, but his likeness, his personality, his behavior has been centered in deceit. Now, is this true in his life? Now, he was a deceiver by order of his mother. And then he was deceived by his uncle. And now he's about to deceive his brother. But he doesn't want that likeness anymore, does he? He wants that old man to be completely dead, and he's willing to fight for it. In the wrestling with this special messenger, which he says is like the face of God himself. It's interesting, the messenger says, let me go, for it is almost morning. Now I thought, did the messenger, was he just late to go to breakfast? What was it? God himself says, no man will see my face and live. I've always wondered if this was in essence a likeness of God here on earth in the flesh, but he could not reveal his face yet. God couldn't reveal his face to Avram, so he put him to sleep, and God essentially makes a covenant with himself. It can't be broken if it's through himself. But Yaakov wants to fight. He gets a new name, Yisrael, and Yisrael is compiled of many different new letters and many different things. We see that a lamed is added to his name at the very end, Yisrael, and that is the staff, the authority, the household, the shepherd's crook. We see that you could break up the word Yashar and El. Yashar is where we get Jasher from. It means an upright spine, upright righteousness. And it infers that he wrestled with God and could stand afterwards. And El, of course, meaning God. Yashar El, one uprighteous in the eyes of God, but also a wrestler with God. his name changes forever and his people change forever. You know, it's interesting that his children were already born and named, all but, who was it? Benjamin, yep. The youngest, the one who also gets picked on. It's interesting to think that they weren't Israel yet. They were sons of deception. Now, of course, what they do is they also deceive their father, sell their brother into slavery. Who hasn't thought of that a couple times, right? The deception ran in the family, and Yaakov said, I want this to end. I'm often reminded that the deeds of the parents are portent to the children, that the likeness of the parents are in the children. You know, a lot of people they like to scream at their kids and yell at them in the middle of a Walmart or something. Can we say Walmart on live? Do we have to pay them $5 or they pay us? But I've seen on social media where people have posted these things, bashing their spouses. And I can't believe my husband did this. I can't believe my wife did this. My children are so unruly. Wow. To shame your own household publicly. You know, Yaakov, he was in exile. Do you guys know for how long? 21 years. 3 cycles of 7. A lot happened in that time, of course. He married these sister wives. But he wanted to return to the land. He knew that the land of Israel had a certain landmark. It had a certain relationship with God, and he wanted that again. Here's a small summary of the events in this Parsha and how they correlate to us today. Jacob, of course, becomes Israel and is the father of all Israel. That is not just the place, that's the people. When he was leaving for Padan Aram, it reminds us of the current Roman exile. People don't really think that we're in exile, do we? Do we ever think of that? Are the Jewish people still in exile? Absolutely. Where are we today? It's not so bad. Everywhere, yeah. It's not so bad in Colorado Springs, but it's not Jerusalem, is it?
Amen.
This 21 years in exile reminds us of 21 centuries in the diaspora. He marries these 2 sisters, and these 2 sisters give Yaakov 2 messianic seeds, which will basically eventually become the conception of the 2 messiahs. To explain that real quick, in the Talmud it states that we'll have 2 messiahs, right? We know that Yeshua actually embodies both, but Mashiach ben Yosef, the suffering servant, the Shamash, the lamb, and the son of it's Ben David, the conquering king, the Lion of Judah, the one that will save us from our exile. Yosef, the son of Rachel. But David is a son of Leah. What you have through Israel is a very interesting concept. You have through his seed as a dispersion throughout the world, and then with Messiah, you see it kind of come back together. I've always thought it'd be fun to find out someday, how many of us actually have DNA from all these tribes. Not that DNA is nearly important anymore as much as the DNA of our Messiah himself. But it's interesting because with so much mixing, I wonder if someday somebody will be born with the DNA of all the tribes of Israel again. I wonder how they'd act. I wonder if they'd even know. I wonder what prophetic things might happen during that time. When at the end of the diaspora will be symbolized in one individual. We still wait for this unification, though. This fulfillment of prophecy of the northern and the southern tribes coming together. We know that in Ezekiel 37, there's a prophecy. You can see it in verses 15 through 22. I would say it's a second or the third prophecy in this chapter. Of course, the prophecy of the two houses, the two sticks, Ephraim and Yehuda. We pray for that unification, and I think that there is some of that unification even here in this building today. People of the house of Judah and people very possibly with the blood of the northern tribes coming together and being unified. I want to ask, we're going to point out a couple of these foreshadows in this Parsha to represent the fulfillment of unification through unification. And then we're going to look back into Yaakov and Esau. And when they meet. You know, Yaakov here, he obeys God's direction, that it was time for him to leave Padamaran. We see Israel obeys God's calling to return to the land after World War II. We know that in the early 1900s, there was an opportunity for the Jews to leave Europe, especially Western Europe, and return back to the land of Israel. But what did we say? We like it where we're at. There may have never been a Holocaust if we followed the calling to return to our land in the early 1910s. But we were very comfortable being integrated in Germany, in Poland, Russia, different places. What would it be like if we followed the Lord's calling to come back? Now, it took a lot. It took a lot of death, a lot of despair, but we eventually came back. And with the help of other organizations, recreated the state of Israel. You know, one correction I'd like to make in our liturgy here is Israel is no longer a state. Israel is a country. Israel is a nation, and Israel has a capital. I'd like to fix that in our liturgy. It said the state of Israel for far too long. Saying the state of Israel meant that it could come and go. But a nation does not just come and go so easily. We see here in our Parsha that Yaakov meets again with Lavan, and Israel peacefully breaks ties in the diaspora and becomes that independent state when it did. We see that unification there. Now we see this meeting with Esau, Yaakov and Esau. In today's history, the children of Esau are still fighting with their sibling in rivalry and this family feud, trying to kill Yaakov, trying to kill Israel. You know, there was a guy a long time ago, many people called a prophet. He was in the Middle East. He was of the Arab people. His name was Muhammad. And not Muhammad Ali. I know you're thinking of, sting like a, what is it? Fly like a butterfly, sting like a beetle. This was a different guy. This guy essentially was a con. He decided to trick some people into following him, and he said that he was a prophet of the Lord, and he started writing a book. He wasn't very good as an evangelist. He actually only made 70 converts to his new Islam in 12 years. What he did is eventually the people realized this man was a false prophet, and they kicked him out of Mecca. So he went north to Medina. Guess where he found sanctuary? The only people that would take in this false prophet were Jewish tribes in Medina. These Jewish tribes showed this man Muhammad great hospitality. They loved him, they fed him, they housed him, they found him work. He took advantage of the hospitality of the Jewish people. He began to grow his movement again in this area, even brought up some people from Mecca. He started this as a political movement, caused a lot of ruckus, and then presented solution. Today we call that Marxism. Same way Hitler got into power. And this man started this political movement which strengthened the faith that he started, the faith movement, and then he created an army. This man said that he heard from God. He didn't treat children very well. He didn't treat anybody very well. At one point he said, I feel that we are ethnically the children of Ishmael. Now, this was a feeling that this false prophet had. There, of course, being of the Arab world, there is a lot of the bloodlines and from Esau, from Ishmael in this time. But for this false prophet Muhammad to say that he was a direct descendant of Ishmael was just him giving another false prophecy. The sons of Esau are most likely something else. But either way, him claiming to be a son of Ishmael claimed, and Esau was him also claiming that he is the enemy of the Jewish people. The very people that showed him hospitality, if it weren't for them, he would have died in that desert long ago. Of course, Islam today is the fastest growing movement that the world has ever seen. It has become a plague to this nation, to this world. Now, Muslims themselves, I know many Muslims that are very wonderful, kind people. Where I have been thrown out of homes by Catholic people, I have been welcomed by Muslims for tea. Just about everything I had was kosher. Well, everything I had was kosher, obviously, but almost everything they had to offer me was kosher, of course. To understand that hospitality that can be shown by many Muslims, even in our community here, is because they have taken the likeness of the children of Abraham, the most hospitable. Remember, it was only a year and a half, maybe a year and a half ago, there was a synagogue in Pueblo, oldest synagogue in the state. And they were threatened by a man who called himself a Nazi. Now, I don't know how he could, because we defeated the Nazis. I wouldn't claim to be of a losing group, but some people like that, apparently. And he says, I'm going to bomb this synagogue. Remember that? Somebody heard about it. A man who runs this halal meat market right here, right next door to this building. He gathered some of the kind Muslims in this community. They went, they talked to the rabbi, and they surrounded the synagogue and said, if you want to kill these Jews, you've got to go through us first. But that's not the hospitality of Muhammad. That's the hospitality of Avraham, of our prophet. My own father, he didn't grow up with the Bible. But when I was done being prodigal, I came home and he said, Michael, this is, after many years, after 4 years, he said, your room is just the way you've left it. He goes, honey, we're getting steaks. Our son is home. And he went and brought me a new coat and new shoes. He had never read the story of the prodigal son, yet he emulated the father exactly. He did everything but put a ring on my finger. He said, my son is home. And that's not the hospitality of the world my father was raised in atheism. That's the hospitality of Avraham. It's interesting to see that compassion can come from people who attach themselves with the least compassionate people on this planet. We see that Yaakov was a deceiver of many, many things. And he really was just looking out for his own skin when he sends his brother these goats and these oxen and these servants and all these things, thinking, Esau's going to kill me. So he spends a whole day of giving these gifts. But he knows that God told him to go that way, so he went that way anyway, didn't he? He gives these gifts. He meets his brother. I can only imagine this big swallow in his throat thinking, I'm done for. What does his brother do? Scripture says that his brother ran up to him, fell on his neck, and kissed him. They wept together. That relationship bond of brothers came back together. So whether Muslims today are ethnically of Esau or not, they have claimed to be, and whether many Jews and people grafted in today are ethnically of Yaakov or not, we claim to be. We look forward to that reconnection. A lot of people will say the northern and the southern tribes coming back together is really just Jews and Christians. A lot of people believe that in this world. It's much, much deeper than that. The reunification includes Buddhists. It includes the Hindus. It includes those doing the, what's it called? Santa Mia. It includes all the tribes in Africa worshiping in the animism. It includes those in Roman Catholicism and Orthodox Judaism. It includes those who worship no God but self. If you don't know, if you worship no God, you just worship self. I don't know if you knew that. Genesis 32:1 says, Yaakov went on his way, and the angel of God met with him. And he left the land. The angels met with him on a ladder to encourage him and reassure him that he will return. He has a little conversation. When Yaakov saw them, he said, this is God's camp. And he called that place Mechanaim, 2 camps. Yaakov sent messengers ahead of him to Esau, his brother, toward the land of Seir in the country of Edom, with his instructions. So before he met his brother, he split things into 2 camps. We see that this world right now, the followers of the God of Israel, are in more than 2 camps. The reason he split these camps was for the protection. But the reason why we will reunify, why God will reunify the camps, is for his glory. Pardon me as I skip down here a little bit. Our master said in the book of Matthew, Matthew 11:12, the violent take it by force. There's a lot of things that he's talking about here, but one thing is certainly inheritance. We can't be a people of violence because we'll just receive it back. Has anybody ever experienced that? We can't be a people of revenge because we'll just receive it back. Yaakov decided to give everything he had to his brother who already had much. Yaakov traded this to keep his inheritance. Esau traded his inheritance for soup. But Yaakov gave up everything he had to make sure that he was continuing the lineage of Avram, to move back to the land that was promised to his father. So was he just a weak liar and deceiver? Or was he doing everything in his power to make sure he was following the God of Israel, keeping his bloodline? He shows compassion, love, and hospitality, and he receives it back. You know, being a peacemaker is not so easy. We see that David, we see that different people throughout the scripture had to find out when to be a warrior, when to be a peacemaker. In our lives, it's not so easy. It's oftentimes at the cost of our pride, our stuff, our belongings, our property. But I pray that we can be peacemakers in the name of the covenant with our God, because that's what we're protecting. We have a covenant of peace. I know it's pretty easy sometimes to feel like we have been gifted with the authority to walk into every church and tell them how pagan Christmas is. I know that sometimes we're given the zeal and compassion to get on Facebook and just start bashing people for the bad theology that they have, or doing this at a service. But if we are approaching situations as not peacemakers, but antagonists, what shall we receive in return? Yeshua encourages us through the following words in Matthew 5:9. How blessed are those who make peace, for they will be called sons of God. When Yaakov sees Esau and he says, I'm So happy to see you, bro. It says, seeing your face is like seeing the face of God. Why would he say that? Is he just trying to build his brother up and make him feel good about himself so he doesn't kill him and his family? No, he has a new identity. He is now a man who is righteous in the eyes of God, and he wants to keep it that way. He changes his lineage forever. He changes the lineage of his children forever. He even upholds the righteousness of the name of his fathers and of his mothers. He is no longer a man of deception, but he is a man of compassion and a man of peace. Now, of course, for the Jewish people, it hasn't always been easy since then. We've been attacked and imprisoned, murdered, mistreated, cursed by many people ever since, and it's still happening. And anti-Semitism is actually on the rise exponentially in America this year alone. But we don't react with armies, we react with gifts. We don't react with warfare, we react with hospitality. And we don't react in vengeance, we react in compassion. It's not easy, but Yeshua did it. He was spitting, his face was spit on, he was beaten. He had one of these things beaten into the top of his head. If you didn't know, those thorns in that area have a toxin in them that puffs up the skin. The burning sensation that doesn't go away for a long time. And he was thrashed, and he was pierced, and he was hung, and he was killed. And a lot of people believed that he would return that moment with a sword. And it would have been a really cool story. Like every superhero movie we see, he gets beaten down and he finds a new power. He comes back and he just kicks the snot out of the bad guy, right? He comes down and he goes, I'm going to do some more teaching and let's eat together. I want to unite you guys. And I think that's the example we need to follow. If we claim to be Mishichim, Messianics, followers of the Messiah, we ought walk as he walked. If we claim to be Jews, we must show that same compassion and hospitality and love as Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. If we claim not to be Jewish, but followers of the God of Israel, same thing. Grafted in the same family, you don't get a free ride. You don't get to sin so that grace abounds. You don't get to just go and sin no more and continue sinning and treat people differently. It pains me when I talk to servers and they can't stand, well, right now, everything's closed, but they can't stand being a server on a Sunday. They say when people come in after church, we get more complaints than anybody else during the week. We get the pickiest orders from anyone else during the week. And we get the smallest tips from anyone else during the week. The church has represented to the unchurched servers in the restaurants in our communities. It has not represented the God of Israel. Has the church lost its representation, its proper representation of the God of Israel? The synagogue has also kept the Torah to itself when we were always commanded to bring the Torah to the world. Amen. In conversation with an Orthodox Jew, I've told many of you people, an Orthodox rabbi actually. In Miami, we were talking. He goes, Mike, who was one of the best Jews in history, who carried out a Jewish calling that no other would. I said, who is it? He said, King James. What do you mean? He said he printed the Torah in a common tongue and sent it all around the world, making him one of the best Jews in history. I said, he wasn't Jewish, of course. But our job was to take the Torah to the world. And the Torah even came down in flesh so that that word could also be taken into the world, the same word. And we've allowed, the Jews have still allowed the non-Jewish people to do a better job. That is not being sons of the God of Israel. So as we continue into Hanukkah, which is coming up in 5 days, actually. In 5 days, we'll be lighting the first candle in our homes. Of course, on Sunday, we'll be lighting several more here together. I want us to remember what it means to be a child of Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, to be a Meshichim, a follower of the Messiah, what it means to be a follower of the God of Israel. And we're going to reignite each other to be a light to the world, to be a light to this nation. If we are not sharing this good news, we don't deserve this good news. If we're not sharing our salvation with others, well, nevertheless, we don't deserve that. But we are not in appreciation of it. I was speaking to a man. He called me to anoint him and pray with him last Sunday. And he says, the Lord speaks to me all the time about this and that and this and that. I want to tell you this and that. I said, that's not for me. That's for you. And he goes, well, he's telling me this about my marriage and about the world. And I say, you're writing this down, right? He says, well, no. I said, how many years has it been since the Lord's been talking to you? He said, many years, most of my life. And I said, when have you been writing it down? He says, I haven't been. I said, how many people on this planet do not hear from the Lord directly? He goes, I don't know, probably the majority. I said, and you are saying that the Lord speaks to you directly? And he goes, well, yeah. And I said, and you're not even writing it down. So what a shame. What a shame to have a gift and not even use it for your own benefit, your own edification. May we be responsible for what the Lord has given us, and may we act in our callings. May we pursue righteousness. May we understand our place in the kingdom and actually have the boldness to start walking in it if we're not already. It'd be a shame to receive a gift from our God and not use it. It'd be a shame to write a beautiful song and not sing it. To paint a beautiful painting and not show anybody. To have a heart of compassion and hospitality and never invite anybody over for dinner. It'd be a shame to be a child of the God of Israel and not help others become adopted into that family. It would be a shame, wouldn't it? Even to our enemies, let us be like Yaakov. Shabbat Shalom.